Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are getting into what is, it's arguably the world's most famous food,
Yeah.
pizza Napoletana.
hmm
But we're not just here to talk about, pepperoni or pineapple.
Right.
We're here to really explore what authentic means and why this really simple dish carries so much history, science, and national pride.
Exactly. I think most people have this idea that pizza was just invented one day.
Yeah.
Some clever chef in a tall hat.
Right.
And that completely misses the point. When you actually dig into the sources, the city records, traveler counts, the official rules, you realize it's not a story of one person at all.
It's a 1,000-year story. It's about urban poverty, culinary evolution, and then eventually this incredibly specific codified craft.
Yeah.
We're really looking at how a street food became a UNESCO intangible cultural heritage.
Our mission today is to go beyond the menu. We're going to look at how this food really is the soul of Naples. It didn't come from a palace kitchen. It came from centuries of struggle. And that struggle turned baking dough into a real art form.
Okay, let's get into it. And we have to start at the very beginning. I'm talking long before cheese was even part of the equation.
Right.
Back when the one ingredient that defines pizza today was actually considered poisonous by most of Europe.
The tomato.
Exactly, the tomato.
So the foundation, a simple flatbread that's ancient, that's been around the Mediterranean for, millennia.
Mm-hmm.
But the real turning point for what we call pizza was the tomato arriving from the Americas in the 16th century.
And it wasn't exactly a welcome party, was it? For the European elite, the tomato was deeply suspicious.
Very suspicious. It's in
Oh.
the nightshade family, which already made people nervous. But the real problem was that the acid in the tomato would leach lead from their pewter plates.
And they'd get sick.
They get lead poisoning and blame the fruit. So for the wealthy, it was poison.
But not for the poor in Naples.
No. They didn't have fancy pewter plates. They had a need for cheap calories.
Yeah.
So they were the first to just ignore the warnings and start spreading this strange red fruit on their dough. It was purely functional. It was survival.
It's amazing how fast that caught on. By the 1700s, this wasn't just some weird snack. It was a staple food for the working class.
Oh, absolutely. We have accounts from travelers like the French writer Alexandre Dumas. He was in Naples in 1843, and he wrote about how pizza was the customary breakfast for laborers and fishermen. It was cheap fuel.
A grab-and-go meal to get you through a hard day's work.
And that demand created a profession. By the 18th century, the job title, pizzaiuolo, the pizza maker, starts showing up in official records. That's the beginning of an organized craft.
And to really get the social context, we have to talk about the Lazaretti. Who were they?
The Lazaretti were the poorest of the poor in Naples. Truly destitute, often homeless, living day to day.
And pizza was part of their economy?
It was their survival. They would sell small pieces of pizza right on the street, often with just a bit of lard or basil. It wasn't just that the poor ate pizza. The most impoverished people in the city were the ones making and selling it to survive.
So you have this food born from absolute poverty and necessity. How on earth does it jump from that to being a symbol of national unity?
Well, this is where food and politics just slam into each other.
Okay.
Pizza was a huge local thing, but its national, even global fame really starts with one man, Raffaele Esposito.
This is 1889.
Yes. Italy had only recently been unified, and the new kingdom was desperate for cultural symbols that could bring all these different regions together.
And then Queen Margherita of Savoy comes to visit Naples. So set the scene for us.
Esposito, who was a well-known pizzaiuolo, was asked to make pizzas for the queen. He makes 3 types, but one of them was a stroke of genius.
The one we all know.
The one we all know. He designed it to explicitly honor the new nation. Tomatoes for the red, mozzarella for the white, and basil for the green.
It's the Italian flag.
It's a tricolor, an edible declaration of Italian pride.
That is just brilliant culinary diplomacy. Whether he knew it at the time or not, that was incredible marketing. He took a street food and made it patriotic.
A powerful act of branding. But what's so important is to connect that royal moment right back to the street. Because while the queen is eating her symbolic pizza,
The workers are still eating their 3 lire pizza.
exactly, the people's bread. It was a tiny, cheap portion they might even buy on credit before a shift. So this one dish, it suddenly belonged to everyone. It was democratic.
It spanned from the absolute poorest person on the street to the queen in her palace.
Which made it the perfect national symbol.
And that craft, that knowledge, had to be passed down. It wasn't in cookbooks back then.
No, it was all apprenticeship. You had masters, the pizzaioli like Pietro Pizzaiolo back in the 18th century, and that line continues to see modern figures like Enrico Brandi, one of the founders of the AVPN.
The association that protects the tradition.
Right. And they all reinforce this idea that you don't just decide to be a pizzaiolo, you have to earn it. It's a physical skill passed from master to apprentice.
Okay, that brings us perfectly to the technical side. Let's move from the history to the to the chemistry. The Associazione Veraci Pizza Napoletana, the AVPN, they literally wrote the rule book. So what's rule number 1?
It all starts with the flour. It has to be tipo 00.
And for anyone listening who doesn't know, what does that mean?
It's extremely finely milled, soft wheat flour. It's generally lower in protein than, say, American bread flour. And that's critical because you're not looking for a tough, chewy crust. You want something soft and tender.
Okay, so flour is locked in. Then comes the fermentation. They're very specific about this, long and slow.
Very specific. 8 to 24 hours at a cool room temperature, about 20 to 23 Celsius.
Why so slow? What's the point?
It's all about digestibility and flavor. If you rush it, you get what they call tired gluten.
Tired gluten.
Yeah, the starches and sugars haven't broken down properly. The result is a heavy crust that feels like a rock in your stomach. The long, slow rest lets the yeast do its job, creating complex aromas and a light, airy structure.
A structure that is shaped entirely by hand. I love this rule. Absolutely no rolling pins.
Never. A rolling pin is the enemy. It would just crush all the beautiful gas bubbles you spent 24 hours creating.
So you have to use your fingertips.
Only your fingertips. You push the dough from the center out, which actually moves the air to the outer edge. You never press the rim. That's how you create that iconic puffy edge, the cornicione.
And the toppings are just as strict, a minimalist approach.
Totally. San Marzano tomatoes,
Yeah.
crushed by hand, never cooked before baking. And then either fior di latte or buffalo mozzarella. That's it. The toppings are there to complement the crust, not overwhelm it.
Okay, but the real moment of truth is the bake. This is where the physics comes in.
This is where the magic happens. A wood-fired oven. And the temperature has to be, well, extreme. We're talking 430 to 480 degrees Celsius.
Which is, what, over 900 degrees Fahrenheit?
Insanely hot.
And the bake time is just, it's shocking. 60 to 90 seconds. Max.
That's it.
What is happening in that minute and a half?
It's a thermal shock. Two things happen at once. First, the moisture inside the crust instantly turns to steam. It's so fast it inflates the gluten structure, making it puffy and light.
Okay.
Second, that intense heat kicks off the Maillard reaction. That's the browning, the caramelization. It creates those beautiful charred spots, the leopard spotting, which is the sign of a perfect bake.
So that char isn't a mistake, it's the goal.
It is the goal. It tells you the fermentation was right and the temperature was right. It's the pinnacle of the whole process.
And after all that science, the finish is so simple.
Just a few leaves of fresh basil, added after the bake so the aroma doesn't cook off, and a little drizzle of extra virgin olive oil. Done.
And that whole process, the history, the poverty, the incredibly precise technique, it all led to this huge moment in 2017.
The ultimate recognition. UNESCO declared the art of the Neapolitan pizzaiolo as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity.
And it's important to stress they weren't just protecting a recipe.
No, not at all. UNESCO was recognizing the whole culture around it. The craftsmanship, the social ritual of the pizzeria as a community hub. It's the entire ecosystem.
And you can argue, really, that pizza was one of the world's first global fast foods.
Oh, for sure. Long before the big chains, Italian migrants took this food all over the world. It was portable, it was quick to make, and the flavors are just universal.
But its value today is so much more than just a quick meal. The pizza sector is worth billions to the Italian economy.
Billions. It supports this whole agricultural supply chain. The farmers growing the San Marzano tomatoes, the dairies making the buffalo mozzarella. It's huge.
And socially, there are these powerful stories that often get overlooked. You mentioned the pizzaiolo.
Yes, the women. Their role is so often invisible in the official histories. They were the ones often making the dough at home or baking pizzas to supply the men who were selling on the street. Their labor was absolutely essential to the whole system.
A crucial hidden history. And there are even more modern stories of, well, of civic courage tied to this food.
Absolutely. In the 2000s, Naples was dealing with serious organized crime issues, and pizzerias were often targeted for protection money, the piso.
Right.
And the pizzerias that publicly refused to pay They became symbols of resistance. They put signs in their windows.
Mm.
Making and selling pizza became this powerful political act, a stand for justice in their community.
It's just incredible to think that flour, water, and tomato can carry the weight of national identity, of economic stability, and even of resistance against the mafia. It really is resilience in food form.
When you put it all together, you see why people call it Italy's culinary flag.
Mm-hmm.
It really embodies the spirit of Naples. It's resourceful, creative, deeply communal, and fiercely protective of its traditions.
The whole story is this amazing lesson in, I guess, cultural alchemy. You take a desperate need for cheap food among the poor, and over centuries you refine it, you codify it, until it becomes this high art form recognized by the entire world. And that really leads us to our final thought for you to think about.
How does a dish that was founded on poverty, built on 3 basic ingredients, red, white, and green, how does it manage to enforce such incredibly strict scientific rules all over the globe?
While at the same time generating billions of euros and acting as a global ambassador.
It's that perfect intersection of identity, art, and the simple, undeniable power of a perfect crust.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope your next slice tastes a little different. We'll see you next time.